Hey everybody! Today we're going to be talking about my 3 favorite things I like to eat when I go back home to Canada. So this list isn't going to be in any particular order. It's just sort of a random list of the 3 things that every time I go to Canada, I just have to have them. This list is also going to exclude candy because, I think my favorite Canadian candies, that's probably another show, another thing, because that's going to be a pretty long list. But these are 3 sort of meals or snacks or things like that that I absolutely have to have every time I visit. So let's take a look at the first one. The first thing on our list is not only the first thing on our list, but it's almost always the first thing that I get when I go to Canada. Now, the reason why this is because there's always a location in the airport, and there's often locations close to borders if I happen to be driving. In fact, there's locations all over the place in Canada. There's even locations in other places. What I'm talking about is Tim Hortons. Now, everybody knows about Tim Hortons, I think. I think it's sort of a joke amongst other people. It's been mentioned in American TV shows. It's always sort of looked at as the ultimate Canadian place. What you get there is donuts, coffee, things like that. So Tim Hortons was established in 1964 in Hamilton. One of the co-founders was Tim Horton, a hockey player who played for, I believe he played for the Maple Leafs, the Rangers. I think he played for Pittsburgh as well. So he had a fairly good career. He actually died though in a car accident in 1974, but not before he started this chain of donut shops, which was sort of a small little thing. I've actually been to the first location in Hamilton. It's a pretty neat little shop. But right now, there are over 4,846 locations all over the world. Now, when I say all over the world, I mean there's some in the US, but you can also find shops in Oman, Dubai, the UK, all over the place you can find Tim Hortons. And for the most part, the stuff is exactly the same everywhere you go. I mean, there's occasionally a few different kinds of donuts you can get, but the classic thing that everybody knows Tim Hortons for is their coffee, which is sort of legendary. I mean, they might actually, I think I've heard a story, this could be not true, but I've heard that Tim Hortons actually buys more coffee than Starbucks. So, I mean, that's a huge deal. They sell so much, and there are locations all over Canada. I'm not a big coffee drinker, but I still love going there. They have this tea, they have an apple cinnamon tea that I absolutely love. And their donuts are amazing. They have Timbits, which are these small little donut hole things, but then they also have the sort of regular donuts. They have like a monthly donut all the time that's kind of special. It's just, to me, whenever I go into Canada, the first thing I do is we go to Pearson, which is Toronto Airport, which is generally the airport I go to because, I'm from Toronto, and I find a Tim Hortons. But quite frankly, I think there's a Tim Hortons in every single airport in Canada, so you're not going to have a trouble. And even if you're driving in, generally any border town also has a Tim Hortons. And if not, just drive along the highway because you're going to hit a Tim Hortons pretty soon. In fact, I think all of Canada would revolt if they weren't within 20 meters of a Tim Hortons at all times. So, I mean, it's such a popular chain. The one thing, I mean, it used to be better. Now, a lot of people claim that things used to be better, but maybe they weren't. Maybe it's just their memories. But the thing that happened at Tim Hortons that kind of changed things was at one point Tim Hortons went from making the dough fresh in every location and baking the donuts to bringing freezed dough into the locations and baking them there. A lot of people say that the frozen dough has actually changed the donuts and lowered the quality. But even a lower quality Tim Hortons donut still warms my heart amazingly. So definitely one of the places I never miss when I go to Canada. It's actually almost hard to miss if you almost have to try. I mean, it'd be hard to not go to one, but it'd be, for me, harder not to eat one. But Tim Hortons is definitely an important part on my list of things I have to do when I eat. So the next place on our list is Swiss Chalet. Swiss Chalet was founded in 1954 in Toronto. This is actually kind of a shock to me because I always thought Swiss Chalet was a Montreal chain. Who knew? But it was actually, the first location was on Bloor Street West, and it only closed down a few years ago. And amazingly enough, that used to be my Swiss Chalet. That used to be the one I went to. That's the one I kind of grew up going to. So this is kind of, this thing blew my mind. But Swiss Chalet is a chicken place, and they do rotisserie chicken, and it is unbelievably good. The chicken is always moist, it's always great, but the thing that everybody loves about Swiss Chalet is the fact their dipping sauce. Their dipping sauce is so good. They actually sell their dipping sauce in a powdered form that you can make yourself, which is pretty close to the real thing, but there's something special about getting it in the restaurant. And the thing about the restaurant too is they come in these little cups where you can dip your fries and your chicken into the dipping sauce, but there's never enough. So almost everybody who's anybody always orders extra dipping sauce. The big thing sort of to get at Swiss Chalet is their quarter chicken dinner. You can get white or dark meat, and it comes with fries or salad. Most people get the fries because the fries are really good and it's something else to dip in your dipping sauce. But the other thing that people sort of remember Swiss Chalet for too is around Christmas time they have something called the festive special, which is where they have sort of the quarter chicken dinner with fries, but it comes with some veggies, stuffing, cranberry sauce. And then you also get, you used to get a Toblerone bar, but now you get little Lindt chocolates. And it's sort of this Christmas tradition that Canadians all over the place go for. And generally you go more than once. So it's like this bonus Christmas dinner you get a couple of times leading up until Christmas. So absolutely, Swiss Chalet is definitely on my list. And the great thing is, much like we were talking about Tim Hortons, there are more than 200 locations of Swiss Chalet in Canada. So almost every town you stop into, every city, there's a good chance that there's a Swiss Chalet there. And the only place that you might have trouble finding one is in Quebec, which is kind of an interesting story because there's a rival chicken place in Quebec known as Saint Hubert, which is it's a chicken place. The chicken is really, really good. In fact, I would almost say that the chicken at Saint Hubert is better. But their gravy is not near the dipping sauce. And quite frankly, the slightly lesser chicken, I would rather have slightly lesser chicken with the amazing dipping sauce than better chicken without that dipping sauce. So, but having said that, the Saint Hubert gravy is actually really good. So it's this weird competition. Like the dream meal in Canada would be if Quebec, Saint Hubert, and the rest of Anglo-Canada, Swiss Chalet, could get together and make a mega restaurant. I'm sure there'd be lineups at the door for that place. Not that there isn't actually lineups at the door for both of these places as it is already. So, I mean, Swiss Chalet is just, it warms my heart. It's something that I always go to, every single time we visit there at least once, twice most of the time. And, if we can do it more, we can. If we can fit it into our schedule, we definitely do. It's a great place, and it's definitely one of the places I consider on my list of the top 3 places I have to visit when I'm in Canada. So the last 2 places we talked about were actual restaurants. So you could find a Tim Hortons, you can find a Swiss Chalet, you can go in and you can enjoy it. And the good thing about those 2 things is you get sort of a consistency. Like, it's a chain. You're going to get the same thing, and most of the chains are going to be pretty similar. This thing, on the other hand, this is a little different because this isn't a restaurant as much as it's a food. And I'm going to be talking about poutine. Now, most of you probably know what poutine is because poutine has become this international huge dish. You can get it in fine restaurants, you can get it in sort of stalls in other parts of the world. I know all over the US, I know even Disney World has poutine shops, like poutine stands. So I mean, it has truly become a global phenomenon. But for me, Canada is poutine, like bringing in poutine. And in fact, I understand that the Prime Minister made poutine our national dish. So I think that's very appropriate. And quite frankly, it's worthwhile because I love it. I mean, you can get poutine everywhere in Canada. Almost as Swiss Chalet, as we were mentioning above, they sell a poutine. There's a lot of you can go to a mall, you can go to a mall food court, and there's going to be a few places that sell poutine. There's places that have different spins on poutine, but it's definitely a classic dish. Now, the history of poutine is a little weird. Apparently it started in the 1950s. And all that we really know about it is that it started somewhere in Quebec. There's several sort of towns and restaurants that have claimed fame to it. And that at one point there's all different sort of stories, things like, oh, well, this is what they had and so they made this, or, somebody wanted to have a special dish so somebody invented this. Like, there's all kinds of sort of legends about where poutine came from. But it definitely is a Quebec dish. Like, I remember when I was younger, it was only really available in Quebec. And it wasn't really an international thing, or not even an international thing, even a Canada thing. Like, you couldn't really get it outside of Quebec, maybe into Ontario a little bit and into New Brunswick and sort of, but generally like the West Coast wasn't really sort of onto this poutine thing until, fairly recently, at least compared to like the 1950s. Now, the thing about poutine, most people say, is there are sort of like different versions of poutine. You can get like seafood poutines, you can get like hot dog poutines, you can get all these different kinds. But the true poutine, the sort of the traditional poutine that I don't think anybody would argue is the traditional one, is you get your French fries, you get cheese curds. Now it's not cheese. Cheese is not the traditional thing. In fact, a lot of people would say that cheese is sort of secondary. You have to get cheese curd, which is an unripened cheese. It's actually before they press it and turn it into the cheese and let it age. So it's really, and it has to be fresh. The one thing, if you go to like Quebec and Eastern Ontario, they're very particular about how fresh their cheese curds are. And the expiry dates on it aren't actually dates, but they're times. Yeah, cheese curd is like a one-day thing, and if you have it within 24 hours, it has a certain squeak to it, and when you put it on your poutine, it melts just a certain way. So fresh, 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 and I've been talking fresh as in hours, is how you want your cheese curd to be. And then you cover that up with a brown gravy. Now, this is the part that can kind of change. I've seen different places have different kinds of gravies, and actually very recently, a lot of the fast food places have been going with a brown vegetarian gravy, I guess so that way, you know, because it's just cheese and fries, it offers a vegetarian dish. But often it's a beef. I've heard beef and pork mixed together, or just a beef. Everybody sort of has their own recipe for gravy for poutine, but it's definitely a science. And one of the interesting things about poutine, one of the things I love about it, is that it is always kind of different. You can go to a chip wagon down in, you know, in the parking lot of your grocery store, and they're going to have one version. You can go to a Swiss Chalet, they're going to have another version, and then even McDonald's had poutine for a while, and that was like another version. Or you can go to a fine restaurant and get another version. Like, there's all these different things. I think putting meat on it is also acceptable, depending on the meats you put and how you do it, but I think that's acceptable. That isn't really a pure poutine. To be honest, I think part of the fun of poutine is the fact that there are so many different kinds, and I think that's the amazing thing. Is it was a dish that, you know, the classic still exists, but it can evolve into other things as well. So that's definitely why poutine is on my list of something every time I go to Canada I have to get. And the great thing is there's so many versions, I can get it like 2 or 3 times and have completely different experiences every single time. So thanks for watching our list of foods that we love to get in Canada. As always, you can follow us on Twitter @CandyCritic, or you can go to candycritic.org and find links to all of our other social media, including Facebook, Tumblr, Instagram, all that stuff. We're constantly posting stuff about our, you know, our adventures, and whenever we go back home, we definitely post about going to these places. You can also go to our Patreon page, patreon.com/candycritic, and you can help support us making these videos and all kinds of stuff like that. We really appreciate our patrons. You also get a Friday video every Friday that's exclusive to patrons, and it just talks about what we've been doing that week and what we've been up to. But thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye.